Well, it's been a hot minute since I last talked about High Speed 2, and in the intervening time there have been some mightily interesting developments. Per the budget announcement, it looks like the extension from Old Oak Common to Euston is going ahead. I'm told a lot of stuff is still in the air with that, but generally it's looking pretty optimistic. I understand they've had the go-ahead to start tunnelling at least. Which is good, because recently Euston Station has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. It's overcrowded, it's unsafe, and it's quite dilapidated. These are not good things for a major London terminus to be. Well, they're not good things for any station to be. It needs rebuilding. If they can find a way to put that arch back in, that would be cool, but I'm not sure that that's what they're doing. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about bats. You see, recently-ish, I was invited over by the guys from High Speed 2, and one structure in particular caught my interest. One of the biggest concerns about High Speed 2 has been its environmental impact. Back in the 19th century, you could do what you liked with the countryside. Dig a cutting through it, run a bridge over it, blow bits of it up, it didn't matter. Things are, shall we say, more enlightened these days. Minimizing environmental impact is a huge part of the planning process. Isambard Kingdom Brunel certainly didn't have to worry about counting newts. But minimal impact is not no impact. And today we're going to talk about one of the most curious measures to mitigate all this. So let me set the scene. We are in the Quainton Calvert area in Buckinghamshire. There used to be a main line through here, the Great Central Main Line, which was closed as part of the Beeching Acts. But a short section was retained here to serve a landfill site. HS2 is to run part of the way alongside this. The government has also specified that this section should include provision for 2 conventional railway tracks alongside the high-speed tracks. This is also where the line intersects with the East-West Rail project, which seems to be totally uncontroversial compared to High Speed 2. Or at least the media don't seem to be getting angry about it. Part of High Speed 2 runs alongside Sheep House Woods, and this, understandably, has been controversial. The wood is home to, among many other creatures, 12 species of bat, including the rare in the UK Beckstein's bat. Is that Beckstein or Beckstein? I don't know, none of the bats I spoke to would tell me. So how do you protect bats from trains? The solution was a bat protection structure, a sort of arched shelter running about 1 kilometre along the line, 10 metres high. It doesn't look like much now, but this is what it will look like when finished. I guess you'd describe it as a sort of series of concrete ribs with steel mesh between them. Holy shelter roof, Batman. The idea is that the woodland will kind of grow around it, causing it to bed in. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Basically, it's going to be sort of like a tunnel, but above ground. There's also going to be a green bridge across the end, which is where I took this footage. Obviously, it's not very green right now. This was one of a number of options considered to avoid splatting the bats. Of the rest, one was to build a mesh screen along either side of the track. Not great, the bats could fly over the screen and onto the track. One was lightweight netting, but this was likely to break far more easily, and once again, bat splat. Rerouting or lowering the railway was considered impractical from an engineering standpoint. An acoustic deterrent was considered, but this, again, was considered impractical. Some of the more off-the-wall ideas were to slow the trains down as they pass the woods, to cut a huge swathe of the woods down, or to move the bats. I once had a bat fly in through my window, and it was hard enough to catch that one, let alone however many are in those woods. Unfortunately, the mitigation shelter option is very costly. It's going to cost over £100 million at current estimates, or the equivalent of approximately 2 nights out in central London. As well as the basic design, there are other factors at play here. One is that provision for 2 extra tracks that I mentioned earlier. This was specified by the government relatively late on, after the design had been approved, so the whole thing had to be redesigned and reapproved. Ground conditions are also not ideal. Remember that landfill I mentioned? That makes the ground here rather less stable than it ought to be, and if you're going to plonk something as big and heavy as this structure on top of it, you're going to have to look at those ground conditions. Drainage is a big issue here too. It's on a floodplain, so ditches and culverts are having to be dug to sort that. Early in November, HS2 Chair Sir John Thompson expressed some exasperation at the situation, complaining about the amount of red tape and approval needed to get everything going. He argues that much of this is unnecessary. Whichever side you take, it cannot be argued that this has also added to the costs. You might say, it's enough to drive you batty. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the mitigation to my bats. I would also like to thank the folks at High Speed 2 both for the site visit and for providing much of the information used in this video. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.